It's a high-tech conversation
and a low-tech topic.
live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.
Right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bench Talk 101. This week, we're going to talk about work holding and what are your ingenious work holding methods? Well, I thought we'd go on off what we did a few weeks ago, and I'm going to give bonus points and raise a glass to the most, the most, I can't remember the word now. The most primitive method, there it is. The most primitive method I will give bonus points to. So let's see what everyone's got in terms of your work holding methods at the bench, whatever it is, and pop your name in the chat and I'll call you up when it's your turn to speak. We've had quite a few people this week preempt me asking you to do that after the last year of us doing this every week. So we're going to hand over to Mitch first. Cheers,
Good
Mitch.
evening, everyone. For my little tip, you're going to need a screw, which is always handy and nice in the evening. Basically, use it like a bench dog. So you want to put a counter bore in the top of your bench, you want to put a pilot hole down at the bottom of it, and you want to countersink the top of the hole. And then you can sink this below the surface of your bench and just unscrew it, wind it up when you want to use it as a bench stop. Simple, cheap, effective.
I think you're high on that list for primitive methods.
Any questions about that?
Should we use a posi-drive screw or a cross head?
You should definitely use the old style where the shank is wider than the actual thread itself, so that the counter bore is a nice snug fit on the shank of the screw. And you're probably going to find that's going to be a slotted screw.
Perfect.
Good question, Andy.
We'll hand over to Andy Tuckwell now.
Well, there's so much to choose from, but I thought I'd go with something not actually primitive, but maybe would strike a lot of people as old-fashioned. Because I'd seen these when I was a kid and sort of knew they existed, but like an old wooden plane, this just looks, must be something better than that now. Why would you bother with something like this? Well, I'll show you one of the, there's loads of reasons why everybody needs a few good hand screws, as we call them now. Case in point, if I just switch the camera over to the other one, I was playing some thin strips of wood today. Nothing very sophisticated, but something like this is a bit of a problem to hold. You can't just put it in the vise. It's too thin and slippery. You can't rest it against the bench stop, which is what I would normally do with a thicker piece of wood. But take your hand screw, lay it flat on the bench, and because these things are made of square section wood, you can always put them on the bench like that. You can whack it down with a holdfast. I'm sure somebody else will talk about holdfasts. And then, you can plane away to your heart's content. And it doesn't matter if it's whipping about. If it's too much, put another one at the other end. They're not rare. They're not expensive to buy. And they come in all sorts of sizes. I mean, there's a little one. Incidentally, they're easy to make. This is one I made. That's one I made. There's a slightly bigger one. That's one Ted gave me. That will fill the rest of the room available, I think. Hang on. Let's just wave that in front of the camera because it's a big old heavy bit of wood. And this one, unusually, has actually got a maker's name on, and it's a plane maker and tool dealer in Tynemouth on Tyneside. Actually, sorry, in Newcastle. Miller of High Bridge. And that dates it probably to the 1850s. But the question for anyone that can come up with an answer, I've got no idea at all, is where's the oldest one? How far back do they go? 1850s isn't very old. I reckon they must be a lot older than that, but they're just overlooked entirely. You won't find a type study of hand screws. You won't find a guide to sale prices realized. They're not named, they're not serial numbered. They're just sort of under the radar, but they're really, really useful. I should say another thing you can do with them, if you've got a little bit of wood you want to shape, you can clamp that in there, put the whole thing in the vise, and you've got clear access. You can clamp one onto another, a little one in a big one. They're endlessly versatile. Every workshop needs a selection of sizes. That's hand screws.
Cheers, Andy. I wonder, you're fairly well read. Is it mentioned in Moxon?
No, I checked tonight before we started.
Will, did you have a question?
Yeah, Andy. Sorry, Andy, the one you held up there for a minute, I think you said you made it yourself. On the back screw, it didn't seem like it was attached or set. Is it just sitting in the opposite jaw, or because it seemed to come loose there? I was wondering what the mechanics of that was. I was interested in this.
Okay, what it is, this jaw has a threaded hole here and a threaded hole here. So as you tighten this handle, it pinches the front together, and when you tighten the other handle in the opposite direction, it pinches it.
It levers it, and the other one. So the one in your sorry, the jaw closest to your right hand, right?
Yeah.
There's no threading on those in that jaw then, either on the top or bottom.
No, this right jaw has one loose clearance hole,
and one just got a point. Yeah, okay, like a tenon or mortise
screw. And the other one has two threaded holes. So it's exactly the same as the metal version that's around as an engineer's clamp. Much used for fitting small pieces to the faceplate of a lathe or the bed of a milling machine, all that sort of thing.
Yeah,
so they're really good for reaching a long way across big work to get glue pressure at the front.
Oh, yeah.
But I think they score for work holding really highly as well.
Yeah, I've got the kits I got a couple years ago. I got a bunch of them, and some I used some a bad leg for a couple legs for a table. The project never got completed for it. I made these really nice jaws. I got a whole set of them. I've got some more for it to work on it, but these are threaded on both sides for both threads, and it's counter
left and right hand threads.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I didn't know about the wood part. I learned something there. Thank you very much, Andy.
These are much simpler to make.
Yeah,
Andy,
scraps.
Andy, another thing that you didn't mention is that you can use these, you can use two of them. If you're clamping together, say a wooden brace, you can attach one to one part and another one to another part. And then because the wooden brace has nothing to clamp to per se this way, then you can clamp the two clamps together and draw them together.
Yeah.
So they serve a lot of different purposes.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean by that?
I think I do. Yeah. What if you have them handy? You could you could show us.
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, say you can make them. I mean, all you need is a tap and die, and the available Chinese-made ones are good enough for it. If you've got an older marbles or something, probably better. If you've got,
Lester, your second camera is also showing.
if you've got the big
Yeah.
big Peugeot ones, but better still. But the wooden threads are remarkably strong. On the 1850s ones, there's some bits have come off, but you know, even with damage, they still work. Don't underestimate the power of wood.
Hello, Andy. Just a quick check. I've just found an oil painting on my list. It was painted a member of the staff at Erdig Hall in sort of North Wales near Oswestry, and it's dated about 1830, and there's one hanging in the background, so at least as early as 1830.
Oh, is that the one with the light in the back of the room and the carpenter with a paper hat on?
No, this is just, it's not probably, unless you've been to Erdig Hall or you've got the book, you probably won't have seen the image. I'll have to put it up sometime, because it's one that I took while I was there, sort of thing. But yeah, but I've just looked up the date and it's from about 1830, so at least as early as that.
Thank you.
I would suggest looking at Diderot and see if you can find it in all those plates of Diderot, because that gets you the 1600s.
I didn't think to check there tonight. There's a brilliant electronic version of Diderot, ARTFL. It's an American university project that gives all the plates searchable in French and in English. It's at one of the American universities, but a search for ARTFL should find it. I'll look at it later, but be nice to track the origins. Sorry, I don't want to make the whole evening on hand screws. But.
No, but so here's basically what I'm talking about. Is you clamp one to one end and another one to this end, and where these are round and you can't clamp them together, once you have these wooden clamps attached to it, it gives you something square to pull the two together with.
Gotcha.
And then you're not having to glue a glue block. A lot of people will glue a glue block that they'll knock off later and damage a finish. But using these clamps that you're talking about, now this is a Jorgensen, which is the newer version, but basically you're creating two glue blocks that are clamped to the piece, and then you can remove them without any damage to the original piece. It's just another handy use for them.
All righty, I'm going to move on to Matthias now.
Yes, thank you. Could you let me share my screen, Shrenik?
Sure. There you go.
Thank you. And share. So here we go. That we don't want. So here we are. No, bother. Was that one I wanted? And so anyway, what I'm going to talk about here is you could call it a bootstrap solution. So 4 years and 3 days ago, my wife and I moved into a rented house. And one of the reasons why we picked this particular house to rent out of the ones we were looking at is because of this, the basement, which has a lot of space and was a potential workshop. So because it's a rental property, there are obviously limits to what I can do in the way of structural or damage to the structure. I dare say the odd hole here and there in the walls won't make a difference in this kind of an environment, but I have to be careful. As you can also see, the room came with, or the basement came with a bench mounted against a wall. This is just 2 layers of MDF. It's about 40 millimeters, so that's about an inch and just over an inch and a half thick, slightly sagging in the middle. It's a nice bench for what it is, but it's limited. So at the time when we moved in, main interest in a workshop was for my model boat building. But about a year after we'd moved here, I got back into woodworking and quickly realized that I would want to build myself a proper workbench. And there you have the bootstrap problem. To build a workbench using primarily planes, you need somewhere to plane all the timber you are going to use to build the bench from. And my solution was to get a couple of sheets of 12 millimeter, so half inch MDF, cut to size so that they form a hook here, which gives me essentially gives me a planing stop. And it's a planing stop not only in that direction, obviously, but also inwards, which means that you can traverse across. When I got down to doing the laminates for the bench top, I finished the glue up yesterday, by the way. I needed to get a shorter piece of MDF over here so that I could get, this is 7 feet and a bit. But it worked very nicely. Yes, when there is some resistance from the material being planed, you will get a bit of bounce back, but it stays surprisingly, it stays surprisingly still, and it's perfectly feasible to work that way. And it's also, when I'm working on shorter pieces, I get out the longer one again so that I don't have to work across the crack here, because as I said, there is a bit of a sag, and it's all right for doing comparatively heavy pieces like this. The kind of thin stuff that Andy was showing us 5 minutes ago would never work, because this surface is not flat enough that you could confidently plane something thin. But for thick timber like this, not a problem. Also, when I need to work across, so here I've been pairing a large mortise for a deadman slide. I just put a smaller piece of MDF in between. I could, of course, and also when I need to have something that hooks onto the front of the bench, like a bench hook or a shooting board, I will put a wider piece across. I could, of course, just remove the inner one, but that's more work. And usually there's a lot of stuff lying around on that. So it's easy to just pop this one in there. And that gives me all the room I need allows me to put a couple of bench hooks or a shooting board and its accompanying bridge against and to work with it. So that was what I wanted to show you.
Thanks, Matthias. I'm going to move back to Chester if no one has any questions.
That was ingenious, Matthias. That was really,
thank you.
Really smart. And it gave you a little more structure to that bench. So that was nice. I've laid out, and I think you can see them on the other camera. I just laid out a few things that I use to hold things, and they're all kind of different. There's none of them very primitive, but I'm going to take this, my iPhone here, and hopefully take it over. And let's see. Got it. All right. So let's see. We'll start back here. This is just a little Walker Turner vise that I use. I attach it to whatever bench I want to work at, and because I like it for little small metal pieces and things like that. Let me take it off here so you can see. It's really quite small. but it's got nice jaws, so it's really good with working metal, little things that you're working on. And then this vise here is called the Versa vise, and I don't know how I can show it to you without bringing that tripod over. So I'm going to do that real quick, because that vise does a lot of things. Hold on 1 second. Let me see, because I have to get my hands free in order to use the vise. Let me know when you can see that. Let's see here.
We can see it.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So it's an interesting vise. These are all different ways that you can attach it to tables. One is a permanent attachment that fits on top of a bench. Another one, this one here, has this stop here. So when you want to use it, you just pull it up like that, and it exposes the rod outside the bench. And then when you're done with it and you don't want to use it, you drop it down, but that prevents it from falling through. And this one that I'm using here is a 2-part. This one just clamps to the edge of the table like that little vise, and like that. And this piece, let's see, loosen this up in order to do it. This one comes off this way. So you have this swivel, and you can turn the vise in almost any direction that you want. And then this fits on. If I wanted to just use it as a regular vise, I could also fit this, let's see, which way do I, this way. I could just fit it onto it this way, and it's just a fairly regular vise. But the nice thing about it is, like the Emmert vise, you can turn it in all these different directions and use it in all these different positions that you like. Now, the funny thing, and I'm not really totally sure how this works, but what it does is, you see this pivots when this is loose. When you put a board in it and you tighten it, it no longer pivots. There's a little lever down here underneath. And so when you loosen it, it takes the tension off that lever and it allows this to freely move around. But once you put something in it and tighten it up, it doesn't move at all. So it's a great vise for doing odd pieces in different directions, and it's called a Versa vise. The next one that I really love for using is this little one here by Stanley.
Jester, before you get onto that new one by Stanley,
yeah.
Andy Tuckwell's pointed out something quite valuable for those of us in the UK and anyone who wants to order from abroad as well. Axminster Tools actually sells a very similar vise, which I have seen and Andy's holding up right now. And I will add the spotlight just so others can see.
Oh yeah, please, thank you.
It's called the Parrot vise.
Yeah, and the Versa vise also had another design that had taller jaws, almost like a saddle maker's vise. That this part here is more extended. But yes, I knew that they were making the reproductions of them, and I'm sure they're just as good. But this one here, I've had, I guess, around 50 years, so it's been around for a while. But they're great vises. If you ever see one, I would grab it. And a lot of times they don't have all of these different attachments, and they really help because they just you can move them from one bench to another. You can drop this down flush into your bench so that if you want to use the bench for something flat, you can make the whole thing disappear, take the vise off. It doesn't have to be bolted to the table. So let me show you this Stanley vise. This is a really cheap little vise, but the reason I love it is that it wraps around, it clamps to the table. And let me see, do I need to move this down a little bit?
It's okay, but yeah, thank you.
That better? It has this L-shaped cheeks. It clamps to the table, so you could put a board in this way and another board up this way and use it to nail two boards together. But the reason I like it is that this goes flush onto the top of a bench. So I use it to carve spoons. So I can put a spacer underneath it and lay it flat with full support using the bench, and I can use my gouges to work on the spoons without any kind of flex to it. So that's why I like that vise. And then this is a little hand vise that I like to use, which is a jeweler's hand vise. And it's square on one side and it's round on the other. And it tightens just with a simple wedge. So if you're using this side to hold a piece of metal per se, and that's usually what I'll use it on, is something where I want to file something. That's a square end, so it gets it out of your way. And if you're doing something that's round, you can use the other side. Then this little vise is called a universal, and it's a clamp. And you see how it's holding the one board to the other one. It's really great for gluing up face frames and things like that, because you can put one end in this side here, and the tighter you make this part pivots. And so the tighter you go here, the to this one. And I think that's the way to show it. Yeah. And then you're free to work with gluing up a face frame, one piece of wood to another one. So it's just a sort of handy clamp to have and use. And so then moving forward, this is the Emmert, which I think you guys have all seen. And what I've done with that is I've kind of changed the angle of it so that you could see that you can pivot it in almost any position that you want, or you can angle the jaws if you're wanting to do a piece that's skinny on one end and wide on another, and then you can make them parallel. And then underneath here, you have two levers which allow you to pivot it, and another lever here that brings it down flat, or you can raise it all the way up and have it working across your bench this way, but you have to empty the stuff that's under the bench in order to do that. And then if you pivot it, you have a machine vise on this side. So it really, and then you have four dogs here. And if you use these two and not these, you can put it up against some dogs or a stop on the bench and use this outside jaw to compress to work like an end vise. Handy. So over here, the last two. Well, this is just a little holdfast by Jorgensen that I happen to like a lot. It works by tension on this side, and it's just a simple rod that comes up out of your bench or drops down, and that hooks on it, and you can put it in any hole on your bench and use it like a holdfast, the same as this kind of a holdfast, but without having to hammer it. So over here, this is just my little coping V-block that I use for if I'm coping something. I can get my blade in there and pivot it and turn the piece, and I work off that as if it's just another tabletop. And this is a Stanley miter vise. I think you can see it. And this, pretty basic. It's mostly for framing, but you can use it for all different other things. I've actually got a frame that I can fit in here, and I can attach things that I'm carving to here, and you can pivot it. That's it, flat. So if you're working in doing the way this works is it clamps onto whatever piece here. So you put your piece of molding there, you attach it, and you do the other one, and it gives you room to tack. If you're tacking two miters together, it gives you work to do that and gives you an automatic square. They made another one of these that incorporated also a back saw for doing miter cuts. I don't have that one. And there's another one where you can actually adjust these angles. I don't have that one either. And this one I just attached to a board, which I clamp to my bench when I want it. And then I store it underneath the bench. And this is just another Jorgensen C-clamp. So just a wide assortment of ways to hold your work. So you can work at them from different angles and aspects. That's it.
Could you show us the wedge talk?
This one?
No, the one that was, you have a metal frame and a wedge with a, looks like a piece of leather or something on it.
Standing to the right of the
hand
emmet.
vise?
To the right of the emmet.
The hand vise?
No, it's on your bench.
Oh, this one.
No.
This one?
Come around to the other side, other corner of the bench.
Okay.
The bench top. Yeah, that one.
This one.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. This one is one that I did a video on, and that's why
Chester,
I didn't
you'll
really
need to
touch
move
on
your-
it too much.
Chester, you need to move your camera.
Let me turn it. Does that work?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me get this out of the way real quick here. The way this one works is this is a Stanley piece, and they made different various ones of these. There's some that are cast iron. Some people just make them out of wood and do it themselves. This was in my father's things, and it didn't have the little wedge piece that fit in here, so I made this one. And basically, whatever piece of wood you put in there, the further down you go, the tighter it gets. So you can plane here, and then just pull it back or tap it back, and it'll loosen up. And you can do it very quickly. So you can switch from a skinny board to a fat board really fast without having to do too much work. Or if you're working on something that you a little square block like that, you can work on it there, and it fits nicely. This one I made with a piece of maple and a piece of walnut, and then I doweled through because I glued this, and I figure if anybody hit that real hard, it would knock it off. So it's just got a dowel through it to prevent that from happening. But it's the one that I use the most for really quick, just some quick planing. And of course I have this other bench stop that I use often enough. And this is another one I did a video on, so I wasn't going to touch on it too much, but basically this one works with these going into either, it could be hammered into a rough stock. Like if you're on a job somewhere and you just have a board, you can nail this in basically. The back part of this acts as a lever to prevent this from coming out, and your wood goes on this side. So in the case of my work here, I can just drop it right into that, and in either direction, and I can put a board here and use this as the stop. So there's a lot. This is not your fancy kind of bench at all, but it's a functional bench that has holes in it all over, and it's all designed to be able to put different sized wood and different shapes on it and be able to work. This is where I work the most. I have another bench with 2 vices over there and another one over there with a single one. But this is really great because I can take large pieces and pivot them around and work on them in all of these different ways of holding them.
Chester,
Yes.
the Stanley one that with the bird mouth there, how's it attached to your bench?
It's got three very large screws
Okay.
that are flush mounted here. And I take them out often if I'm using big sheet work and I need the top of my bench totally clear. It's 3 Phillips screws. I can pop them out and move this out of the way. I've seen other people do another way, which is to attach this like I do this miter vise of Stanley's, how it's attached to a board. And I have thought about attaching that to a board with a bench hook type thing that I can put in my vise here when I want to use it. But the problem is that I've even thought about flush mounting this in, because I've used this for like 5-foot boards. And if it's attached to another board that raises it up 3/4 of an inch, then I have to raise all of this. And so as this is, it's now only about a 32nd of an inch clearance here.
Yeah.
So that's why I do this, and I just unscrew the 3 screws and I put it aside. But I have seen people attach these to another board so that they can fit in there and they can attach it and take it away. I just use it so often that I leave it there.
My question for the use of that would be pulling back the wedge and then running the piece of board all the way through and then using the walnut as your hold fast so that you're now having greater support in the center of the board, so you're running full length. I just think it would work that much even better.
Well, I did that originally before I knew what this mechanism was for. The first thing I made was the wedge without the stop. And the problem was that it would work, and it might have worked better if I had put some rubber or leather here on the face of it. But what happens is, and here I'll do it with that piece of walnut, is that when you come here and you really struggle planing a board, you see, it keeps moving. So this way, it'll fit any size board that'll fit in there. I cannot move that forward. So if I'm planing, it will not slip. So I understand what you're suggesting, but unless you have something there to make it compress more, it'll slip.
I was thinking cork on the inner part of the
something that would compress and tighten was not. And another thing you can do is you can take this and you can turn it around. Now you have more surface. So you could put a piece of cork or something here. And I do get what you're saying, but rarely do I ever need to do anything much longer than that. And really it's to have the stop there. Now I could run this down all the way to this stop because I have this bench stop here. And I could do that. And that would serve a similar purpose. But I kind of adjust and as I go along with each project is a little different. Each board is a little different. And, you know, there's no set way that I have to do any of the jobs.
Right. You use the tools necessary for the job at hand.
Section there, Chester. I'm going to move on to Anton.
Great.
And I'm going to ask if people could start keeping a little bit briefer, just so we can get through everyone else.
Very brief. I'm just hoping my internet holds up. My shop is on the very fringes of my Wi-Fi network, so if anything goes wrong, just kick me. So I wasn't planning to say or do anything. It was just a discussion on Unplugged Woodworkers last week about this kind of Germanic vises we use a lot. Are you able to see them?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, and the point is, many thought they would be flimsy or just not nice to use, but I use them a lot. You know, in the vise, just like you. We don't use hold fast or stuff like this, so you can use them like this to just screw down stuff. These are really sturdy for big stuff, but the smaller ones are really great for this one. Are really great for you know, odd shapes, like, you know, a piece you are working on with, you know, I haven't got the shaving horse, and these work really well just for with your draw knives or and you can I'm sorry, you can use them either way. They sit really stable in the what's the backwise of your bench, so these are not flimsy at all, and I use them all the time. So this was just also in the sense of Andy Tuckwell's you know, old school cramps. Those are the ones we use a lot. And now for the special prize for primitive work holding, I've got two pieces of string from my bench I use all the time, and I just fill them down through those bench dog holes, and you can clamp basically any shape in there and just clamp it down with your foot. You can turn it, but if you apply pressure, it's just like a shaving horse. Oh, I broke it. So that was the price for the primitive one.
Brilliant. Love the string.
Anton,
I think you should get the prize just for breaking your spoke shave.
Yeah, I knew this was the you know, the point to break when I was shaping it. I knew this was this one nut which is going to break for sure in the future.
Rusty will send you a new one.
Pardon?
Rusty will make you a new one.
Nah, I'll make a new
I
one.
appreciate, Chester, that you just voluntold me, but I think Anton has the skills.
Anton, those cramps that you're showing, is there no pad on the tips of them? Do they dig into your wood because they're rounded on the end of the screw?
No, they are just. Do you see? Can you see it?
Oh, it is flat. Oh, it is flat. Okay. Yes.
Like a chamfered semicircle. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have two. I put a little, you know, a nip of nail here and there for when I use it in my parallel wise for, you know, if I want to turn round things in it, shaving round stuff. Or it works like you know, you have those raised bench dogs. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
I think my connection is really unstable. So okay, so that's it, folks.
All right, we'll move swiftly over on to Scott.
So you guys know that last year started just working on some miniature stuff, keeping myself busy, challenging myself a little bit to small stuff, and I had to start thinking inventive, like how do you hold really small pieces? And I'll screen share really briefly. I will try and keep it brief, Germanic. Will I to screen share? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see here I started off with creating just a board with a little mocks on, and I used just threaded nuts into threaded inserts. So the threaded inserts just go into the board, and this is actually sitting on a workmate. That's basically my bench that I work on in here. I don't have a proper woodworking bench in here. So I use a little mocks on in there like that. And in there, I'll just stop sharing. I'll make it quite brief rather than going through lots of pictures. I decided that by planing and adding to my collection, I decided to make a little shooting board, but instead of pushing a pull shooting board. So obviously because of that, I had to buy myself a little canner so that I could actually pull, and obviously a little Veritas block plane. and that clamps in there, and then I can use the planes to actually pull back on and actually plane across the edges to keep them square. The Veritas one's good. Well, they're both good because then you can skew the blade a little bit if you need to actually square them up. So for the miniature work, you have to get really inventive. People have also mentioned the Jorgensens. So obviously you get tiny little metal ones. We've all seen them. I got a few pairs of them. Also bought some miniature brass. I've got a set of 4 of them. I think they're Ice Bear from Japan. Just little sash cramps basically, but small. And when you're working on small boxes and that, you guys have seen like the little miniature dovetails and that I do in boxes. So I've got a little box there to keep my chisels in. Dovetails in all the corners and everything. And you have to start, you can't just use ordinary clamps on these things and that. And I think a couple of the smallest things I've done is a twisted dovetail. So that's a Nagiri Aragata, I think it's called in Japanese, which is twisted dovetail or a sunrise dovetail. So it goes together in the 45 and actually pulls together that way. I've done a tiny, made a little tiny mallet. These guys have seen that to use with my chisels, all done in in different ways. And it's just been trying to be like everywhere else does, it's trying to be inventive, trying to come up with ideas and ways of holding. And when you're working with small stuff, it has to be, you're working with small wood. So you have to try and think about using, I'm trying to find, I've lost it, it's so small. A little tiny 1mm mortise and 10 as well. So I do intend making a scaled door for my students. So it'll be a full-size door, but scaled down to about 200mm with probably about 1.5mm mortises in them at some point. Making far too many metal things just now, but that's me. Thank you.
Cheers, Scott. We're going to move over to Steve, and we're going to keep it brief again.
And I'm going to do just that. My simple holding devices are body parts. The hands. You hold it, you can file it in there, and you take it with you wherever you go. The other one is more specific in ripping boards to width. What I do is I have a bench. I put the board on the bench, I sit on the board, and I start ripping my cut using a saw and using a two-handed method to go up and down. It helps to maintain square and stay on the line, or actually I'll split the line. It depends upon which way or how the wood is going to be utilized. So that's it. It's real simple. I'm done.
Stephen, what are you holding that board upright with? Your knees when you're doing the two-handed? What's holding the board?
My
when you're ripping.
My rear end. I'm sitting on the board. I'm sitting on the board and feeding it through. I just lift my butt a little, feed it through, sit down, and continue to cut.
But so the board is flat rather than on end, up on edge.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, you're okay. Sorry, ripping the width. I was thinking ripping down the.
Oh no! If I'm ripping for thickness or reducing the thickness of the overall board, then that would go into, say, a Moxon clamp mounted on the board or something like that. This is since at the fort when we're doing a lot of carpentries, we've got very wide boards that were cut that we had cut many years ago, so it's all dry, and we need a certain width of a board. So that's where I'm doing most of my ripping. And you just make sure that you maintain a certain distance. Otherwise, I become a moil.
All right, lovely. Thank you, Stephen. I'm going to move over to Jeremy.
All right. I don't. What I have to share today is not a whole lot of novel. Probably most people are familiar with it, but I just thought I would share it because it's sometimes maybe thought of as a specific like chair maker's tool, and that's the shave horse, which I moved out here today. Hopefully you can see what I got going on here. And what even though I kind of created this so that I could get into more chair making type things, I find it very useful for a lot of things for the same reasons that a lot of the other specialty work holding. Being able to easily use your foot as a clamp down here, but apply a huge mechanical advantage to be able to, again, the harder you pull, the harder it holds, and then be able to quickly flip things around and flip it in for end and all that sort of thing without having to constantly be turning, cranking, all that sort of thing. And then to go along with that, a few years ago, I built an attachment that's called a spoon mule, which is sort of works on a similar principle, except it has kind of like a wedging effect where you use your feet to kind of spread apart, and then now you apply a big mechanical advantage up at the top. And this is kind of does what Chester was mentioning about being able to hold a spoon flat on the bench by being able to, you can put something in here and then squeeze it very gently with your feet, and then use your gouges or whatnot in here. And I will just use the counterpoint to Steve's mentioning about using your hands. When I was 9 years old, I was carving something in my hand, and I do not recommend that, because then I got to see the inside of an emergency room and the inside of my hand at the same time. So I would say always be careful before you use it. And I know Steve is certainly knowledgeable about where to use that, but always make sure you keep your hands free of the sharp bits. And one of the advantages of the spoon mule is that you now have some force behind this that you can apply pressure directly in, but still have kind of a pinching motion. And even though these are kind of designed for chair parts or spoons specifically, I find them very useful for dealing with all kinds of parts in my normal work. So anyway, that's the little thoughts I have to share today.
Jeremy, what are you sitting on? Yeah. Is there a flat surface, or is it the same all the way down? We can't. Did you do a? Oh, you have a seat. Okay. You can move that seat forward and back as you, depending on.
The seat moves forward and back, and this is the Tim Manny plans. I don't know if you've, or Pete Galbert kind of style. You can adjust this seat quite a bit. This just comes on and off with a wedged kind of pin in there. You could, a lot of it, I often have it flipped around on the other end. A lot of people have made it so that if I would have thought about it before, I would have made this as an attachment, just like this one, so I could swap the two out. But sometimes I just have to get scrunched on here if I have both items on at the same time.
That's kind of nice that you can use your knees to clamp, or your feet to clamp that. What is your clamping surface? The underneath the top piece.
So underneath the top piece, I have the rubber gasket material. It's kind of a cork rubber material. It works really well. Some people market it as something, but you can just get it. It's like a gasketing material. Probably your auto parts store will give you that. And then I've got that both on the top and bottom. There's a little V groove cut in here for grabbing things at an angle that you want to grab in there. And this will roll to give you a flat surface, to have two flat parallel surfaces or whatever comes together there. Works pretty well if you're not a chair maker. It's also really nice to be able to sit down when you're working. So that's another.
Is that your own design?
This design is from a chair maker named Bern Chanley in Australia, and then this kind of overall kind of simplistic construction lumber has come from Tim Manny. I think he had an article in Fine Woodworking a few years ago about this general plan that I stole or borrowed or whatever.
All right.
Based the things on.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm sorry to cut it a bit short, but
no, that's great.
I'd like to get others in, so I'm going to move over to Josh.
So I don't think I can compete with a screw or a piece of string, but I thought I would enter this in the crude work holding category. It's pieces of 4x4 Douglas fir. I have a sawhorse, and it has two boards on top with horizontal support. So I just kind of slide it, I drop this between the two boards of the sawhorse, holds it in place, and I use this with my hewing hatchet quite a bit because I don't have a bandsaw. And so, you can see quite a bit of hatchet, hatchet misses there. This piece is just kind of tacked on. It was really useful before there were enough holes in this that friction would just hold things in place. And also when I want to use a carving axe, which needs a greater height than hewing, I just clamp this thing in the, like in a workmate. And then, I could take the workmate out to the backyard while my kid plays and, carve things with the axe. So that's it. It's gravity assisted axe clamping device.
Thanks, Josh, for your submission to the most primitive clamping method. I'm going to move over to Richard Arnold.
Hi there, everybody. I'm just going to try and share screen just to show you what I want to talk about. Right. First of all, my bench holding item doesn't work unless you've got what I call a real bench, as in something that's you're not too fussy about, preferably with a soft top like a pine top or whatever. Typical sort of, some people call it a Nicholson bench, but anything with a soft top that you're not very precious about. And what I'm going to talk about is a bench knife, something you won't probably ever hear much about, and something that I firmly believe was probably used a great deal in England, at least throughout the 18th and 19th century. A bench knife was simply a small piece of steel, and they were often made out of the end of say a table knife, as you can see here. I've took the end off a table knife. So it's a very thin, small bit of steel with a bit of a sharpened edge to one end, probably about, I don't know, about an inch and a quarter long. And it's often associated with window making. It's on a sticking board, and that's what we've got here. We've got a glazing bar on a sticking board, and this is how the piece of wood is held on the sticking board. It's up against a nail or a screw at the other end, and you drive a bench knife into the end grain of the glazing bar there to hold the back end firm while you're cutting the rebates. But I'm sure they were used other than just making glazing bars. I use them regularly just to hold a piece of timber on the bench at the back end to stop it sliding around. You can see here. I mean, this is used in conjunction with a tooth bench stop that I just drop in a simple hole on the bench. The only other thing you need is a pair of pincers to pull out the bench knife when you finish your job. Very quick and easy, very simple, but very rarely talked about. That's it, Shranik. Thanks. I'll just end share.
Brilliant, Richard. Thank you very much for keeping it brief. We'll move over to Mikkel. You'll have to tell me if I'm saying your name correctly.
Yeah, my name is pronounced like Michael.
Oh, Michael. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, just like the English version of Michael, Michael. Okay, Stephen beat me to it with the butt clamping. So just sitting down on the stuff to drill out mortises or doing such things. So this is pretty primitive, I guess. And I'd like to say something positive about the tailwise, which we don't hear a lot because in the Anglo-Saxon world, it seems to be frowned upon. But it is, in my opinion, a really versatile vise to use. We saw it earlier in Anton, with Anton's method with the C-clamps, with the wooden C-clamps. So you can combine it in various ways. It's not just to hold down a board for planing. You can also add clamp stuff in the open part. And for example, you can also reverse the bench hooks and pull stuff from each other. If you want to undo things which are stuck, you can just reverse the thing and use it to pull, which you can, for example, not do with the bench or planing stuff. So it's very versatile, and combined with other types of work holding like these wooden clamps, it's really useful. And also these kind of, you have to screw things. Yeah, you just have to screw a little bit to undo the clamp, and you can take it out, turn around, put it in, and do a little bit of push on the lever, and it's fixed again. So this is also quite fast. So some positive words about the tailwise.
Thank you very much, Mikkel. Sorry, Michael. I apologize. I'm just trying to find out who was next. It was Daryl.
Well, okay, I'm on. All right. I use a stick sometimes to clamp things down. You push it against the ceiling of the shop and then wedge it against whatever you're holding, and it holds things down really well. That and Stephen's gravity clamp. But sometimes you use a piece of steel that helps hold things down. That works really well if my wife's not around to sit on the other end of something. And that's all I have. Thank you.
I think we're going to need a vote at the end for the most primitive method now. Right, we're over to Andy Brown.
Yep. Well, change of trades. This is, in case anybody wants to have a go, a glove maker's donkey. Used for making gloves. Invented about, what was it, 1807 by James Winter. And it revolutionised the glove making trade. Gloves was hand stitched, and the finest gloves had the straightest stitching and the finest stitching. And it was all down to hand and eye originally. And when he came up with this clamp, I don't know whether you can see there is a row of very fine teeth at the top of the clamp. There's that fine you can barely see them, but that allowed the stitcher, once you've opened the clamp, this would have been sitting on an upstand, and you'd use your foot and you'd pull open and then let it go back, clamping your two parts of your glove that you're going to stitch, and away you'd go doing the stitching, job done. So bit of a different trade, but work holding nonetheless. Up until about what the date here I've got is about 1880, 1880s. The sewing machines came in, so this would have started to become obsolete then. But yeah, something different for you.
Thanks, Andy. Definitely not primitive, but we'll move on to the last one for tonight, and that is Travis. And Travis, you have been nominated by your dear friend, the champ, or should I say the champ? Yeah, and you've been nominated to show us one of your clamping techniques, your work holding.
Yes, I think I came in a little late, so I wasn't sure how to type in what I was going to be presenting. This is a seat weaving clamp. I think the Shaker's the ones that's where I stole the idea from, but it's essentially like the wooden hand clamps that you have. It's got a right hand thread and a left hand thread, and there are two mechanisms that you can see if they will move independently and towards each other. So they self-center. They hold the seat really well so that I can have my hands free to clamp, except for it looks like it's coming apart now. There we go. Now then, and the other part of it, of course, this little section here comes out. So all this is independent, and it clamps down to the bench with it's a hand screw and a hockey puck. I think that explains it all. If anyone else has questions, obviously I answer. I'm not sure if I got the good explanation of that. But
What if you're weaving a tall ladder back chair? Can you raise that up so that you can go to a higher position for a taller back?
Yeah, you could. I mean, it depends on how high your bench is, but you can obviously put another board up here underneath this clamping portion here, and that'll raise it up. My bench is about 36 inches tall. So this is probably 40 inches. The seat that I'm weaving is about 40 inches or so. And it really saves the back from, I don't know if you've ever woven a seat or not, but when you sit down to do it, you're hunched over for a couple hours. And
That's what I was asking. I just finished a rocker that I delivered, about 2 weeks ago. And the rocker had a really tall back similar to that. But with the rockers, I had to keep turning it upside down and flipping it. I think that's brilliant.
yeah, that's what this thing flips over. So I can weave the underside and then just turn it over, and it's self-balancing. I used to have a rod in the first version. If you can see this portion right here, I think it is. Did I get that?
Yeah.
There was a little J hook and a hole that was screwed into this, and that would hold it in position. But I found that just doing this with your hands and the hand pressure kept it pretty balanced. I never really needed that. So this is now the third version of this. The original was just a bunch of wooden threads. You can see this, they're just, clamps, and then if you can see that, and then on the back side, so it moves independent. So you had to, each side, you'd have to move independently to a chair and hold it up there. They make a lot of noise squeaking. You can't get quite as tight. And with this one, it's almost a one-handed operation to put the chair in the clamp and clamp it at the same time.
Yeah, I guess my rocker would have been difficult because the rockers would have gone under the bench and gotten in the way.
Yeah, so I think the only thing you can do is, like, this thing is long, so it does hold out here. The part of this that goes into the bench part here. So you could make that long enough to then flip it around and then push it back, and the rockers would actually prevent it. They were up here.
Right.
Same way down below, it would be in and out of the way. As long as the rockers fit under the bench, you'd be fine.
Yeah.
Travis, are
Will
you
this work
using
also for
butter knife
backs?
to push the? Travis, are you
Yes,
using butter
this
knife?
is a butter knife that's been bent. That helps push down some of these. I don't know if you can
reed threads.
Yeah, so I can hold this down because I know that I'm going in here, and I can push this guy up if I can get it started.
And another question: the hockey puck is it affiliated with a team? Is it Nashville Predators or no?
No, it's not. I do have one from the inaugural game from the Nashville Predators, but it's up in the house. It's just the cheap ones you get that are they're probably practice pucks, I would imagine. They're just ones that discontinued. They are NHL official NHL, but they're not affiliated with any particular team.
You do your weaving dry?
What's that?
You do your weaving dry, or do you?
No,
wet
it's wet.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it's just barely wet though. I don't. This is a reeding material, so the wetter it gets, the more mushy it becomes. So it's there's a fine line between. And I'm right on the last row, so that's where the most pressure is and the hardest part to get through here. But
Guys, let's leave the chair making question.
Can I ask one real question? Would this style of vise work for doing a back? Like if it was a woven back, or would there be other problems since you've made a couple of versions of it?
I've never woven back with this, but I don't see why it couldn't. The only problem is the backside. You wouldn't be able to get to the backside, but I think you could.
I guess I was thinking about flipping it upside, like flipping it 90 degrees so that it was oriented
I think you could do the front.
But then the legs would be sort of the same issue that Chester was mentioning regarding you had to pull it out, spin it around, push it back.
Yeah, I think, you could probably clamp the front posts up here, and then you would have the back up higher to weave.
Okay.
I don't see why. I don't know how sturdy that would be weaving for that, but usually the backs, though, I think you're down low enough sitting there, and you can stand up some and do, but I don't see why. At least give it a go.
It's a great advice.
Right, I'm going to suggest that any other chair making questions we leave till Travis's talk in a few weeks' time. And I guess a spoiler alert there. And I'd like to bring the meeting to a close and raise a glass, firstly to the most primitive clamping methods. And I think Daryl, I think you got that with the pole, the wooden pole that you stick to your ceiling. Cheers to Daryl and cheers to everyone tonight. Cheers to the bench.
Cheers, Jack. Thank you.
Cheers.